What's up, y'all? Want to welcome you back to the HuntStand Podcast, Season 2, and this is your host, Will Cooper. The HuntStand Podcast is your weekly source for insightful conversations with veteran hunters, dedicated outdoor enthusiasts, and top industry personnel. I'm going to have guests on here who are true experts in their field, diving into the captivating world of our industry and the great outdoors. With each episode, you, the listener, will receive invaluable knowledge, tips, and guidance on how to enhance your skills in the wild and in life. Tune in to be entertained, informed, and driven to reach new heights. The HuntStand Podcast is brought to you by Yamaha and its full line of class-defining, adventure-seeking motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-side vehicles. The HuntStand Podcast is also brought to you by Springfield Armory and their lineup of Model 2020 Waypoint rifles. And finally, the HuntStand Podcast is brought to you by StealthCam. It's never been easier to go wireless with the Command Pro app. Capture high-quality photos and videos of all the action wherever you hunt with StealthCam's advanced cameras and data plans tailored to your needs. So make sure to check out their website today, stealthcam.com. HuntStand Podcast, Season 2. Buckle up. It's going to be a good ride. Let's go.
Well, Mark, you ready to get this thing rolling?
I am.
Well, sweet. Well, Mark, want to welcome you back to the HuntStand Podcast. Last time we talked some elk hunting tips and tactics. And so it's a new year. It's a different time of year. And so we're going to be talking coyote hunting, man. So welcome back.
I appreciate being back, Will. And coyote hunting and HuntStand, they go hand in hand, so to speak. It's always in your hand.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But it's always, it's just a great tool and partner to always be looking ahead into country, scouting new country, whether I'm sitting at home like right now. I can be wasting time not wanting to work like I am most days. Looking ahead to that next stand. Yep.
Well, man, I want to do just a quick reintroduction since the last time we talked to you was elk season. So, I like to do that 30-foot or 30,000 foot view of who you are, so it doesn't matter. Just kind of give the listeners that quick little spiel about Mark, who you are, where you're from, and how you got to where you are in life.
I'm Mark Kayser. I'm just an average Joe. I tell everybody that. I grew up in eastern South Dakota in corn country, so that's where I cut all my hunting teeth, whether it was coyotes, which were tough back then. They were just kind of starting to come into that area, and whitetails. And then my family owned some land in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and I just got immersed in the West. I loved being in the Black Hills and running around on whether I was hiking or on horses or whatnot, looking over elk country. And it just kept dragging me further and further west from eastern South Dakota to I spent about 20 years in central South Dakota and then made the big jump, and I live in Wyoming now, right at foot of the Bighorn Mountains. And my family didn't really even hunt. My grandpa did and my uncle did, but my dad didn't. But my mom and dad always took us camping, and I spent a lot of time with my grandpa. And even though he couldn't get around as good when I was hanging out with him, he'd still take me pheasant hunting and such. And I could see the antlers and stuff in his house, and, pronghorn mounts he had, and the elk and whatnot. And it just it burned within me. And like I said, my dad really never had that, and he took me hunting, set the table for me, so to speak, but he didn't have that passion. He was a businessman. He sold farm tractors. Skidded through life on my own, started hunting on my own, basically self-taught myself everything about hunting for the most part, read what I could, and started freelancing, doing some TV shows while I was doing writing, and here I am. Over 30 some years later, still in the business and still surviving, still loving the outdoors.
Sweet. Can't complain about that, can you?
No, I can't.
Oh, heck yeah, man. Well, for this podcast, let's talk coyote hunting.
All right.
Let's dig into it, man. And so I think there's a lot of listeners out there. They've done it. They may just kind of have done it sporadically with friends, or might be somebody new out there that's really wanting to get into it. So I want to talk to kind of a different, wide variety of people, if you will. And so I guess the first thing I have to ask is, what are some key considerations when it comes to coyote hunting, or if you want to get into it, what are some things to think about before you start buying, doing, and just going haywire with it?
Well, one of the things I think people should just look at first is why you want to do it. And the first big reason is it's fun. The second reason, maybe, and this is kind of dying off because, well, fur prices are just not what they used to be. They did
Yeah.
make some jumps here recently, and like in the last decade, they're just not at high numbers right now. So coyote hunting, for the fur value, not quite what it used to be. The third reason, though, I think a lot of people want to look at coyote hunting, predator hunting, but coyote hunting in particular, is the fact that it helps with wildlife management.
Mhm.
You're providing a little bit of assistance to some of the game animals on your property. The more coyotes you remove, or red fox, or raccoons, or whatever, it helps boost all those lesser or the prey wildlife species. Everything from quail all the way up to whitetails. Coyotes are huge predators on fawns.
Yeah.
Their main period is May into July. That's when they just target fawns. In fact, 70-80% of coyotes, and when you look at the research, they just dump everything to kill fawns then. So you're never going to be able to control coyotes. They're like cockroaches. They just
Mhm.
survive everything. They'll survive a nuclear war. They're like a rat, those type of species. But you know, one or two, three coyotes you can remove off your property, especially maybe even right before the fawning season. That could be a good thing. So whether you do it coyote hunting or trapping, that type of management, that predator management, it's all part of the big management scheme. So that's, for me, I look at the fun and I look at the management, helping wildlife management. Nowadays, it's price of fuel. It's going to be hard to get your money back on
Yeah.
killing a coyote or two over a weekend. Some people that are in coyote rich areas, they can fill a pickup truck yet, but those areas are, I don't have that even in my backyard here. You'd think in Wyoming, uh, it's hard to kill coyotes. They're crafty, they're smart, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, they definitely are. So, you know, what are what equipment do most coyote hunters need? So let's talk to that guy or gal that's wanting to get into it. They may not know what to do. So what do they need in their arsenal, their gear pack, their toolkit to go after these boogers?
So if you're starting out, it's real simple. If you've got a whitetail equipment, just use your whitetail equipment. Again, if you're
Mhm.
shooting them with a 243, a 22 250, or a 7 millimeter Remington Magnum, they're still not worth that. So
Yeah.
you got to look at it this way. I'm going out there trying to kill that coyote. I want to have some fun. Maybe save a fawn in the spring. Don't really worry about what you're shooting. So you can use your deer rifle, your deer scope. Most guys have a variable scope on their rifle, a 3 to 9, a 4 to 12. I try to work in that range of 4 to 6 or 4 to 18, even up into the 20s,
Mhm.
to get a long shot on a coyote. And then a binocular is handy. And you can start out cheap by just using hand calls. Now, everyone's going to want to buy an electronic collar. That's just, it's just the rage. And you should probably have an electronic collar, but
It's
you don't
easier.
necessarily have, but you don't have to necessarily jump into it, because that's, say you got your deer rifle bought, you got a binocular, you probably got your camo, depending on what brand you want to go with, that the cost of that. We don't have to talk about brands that cost a lot and some brands that don't cost so much, uh, but it's that collar that probably would really set you back quite a bit, if you wanted to get started. You can spend 20-30 bucks and get a couple different hand calls and easily be in the calling game. And then if it's something, this is exciting, I love it, I'm going to, set aside 200, 400, 800 bucks for an electronic collar in the next year or two. That's what I'd do. But think of your whitetail gear, buy a few hand calls maybe to get going, and then think about the electronic collar if this is a bug that really hits you. And I think most people that get into it, first time you have a coyote come across the field, sneak along the edge of a hedgerow or something, and you get a shot at him, get that first coyote. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, there. I love nothing more than, you're kind of in that lull between deer season, turkey season, and it just kind of fills that void. And you just go out there and you throw a caller, or if you got your hand calls, and you're just sitting there, all of a sudden, coyote pops up, and it's pretty exciting.
It is. The first time I really had it work for me, it was just I watched a coyote come from a long ways out through across a big snowy valley, got to within 75 yards of me, and I was using a hand call. My grandma had, maybe I had a 22 250 then. It was either 243 or 22 250. But my grandma had given me a 243, and I used that for a while. But that was cool, and I was hooked, and that was 25, 30 years ago. I don't even know. It's quite a few years ago.
Okay. So we've talked about, you figure out your why. We've talked about, just kind of the bare essentials you need in terms of gear. Obviously you can go haywire, you can go nuts with it, get all the expensive, fancy things that you need for it. So we got the why, we got the gear. Now let's talk about the how. When Mark goes out there and you're approaching field of view or whatever you're going to be doing, where you're going to be hunting, how do you like to approach that first sit?
I'm a real early morning person. I get up super early. So on my first sit of the day, I go in the dark. Now, where I hunt, it's big open country for the most part. I've got some timbered, forested areas I hunt, but most of the stuff I'm covering, I'm cutting across open country. So I use darkness to get way deep in, right into the middle of an area I believe coyotes are going to be set up, and then I wait 10, 15 minutes for that first light when I can start to see good enough. Because coyotes, you're going to be so surprised at how they can sneak in on you. It's just, they're just ghosts. I mean, some will charge in, those young ones early on, they'll charge in. When you get on a 2-year-old or older coyote, or even a coyote of the year that's been hunted a little bit, they're super savvy. So I always wait so I can see enough with daylight, but not too much, because I still think that dim light gives coyotes confidence. It boosts their, I'm going to go see what's going on here. It's not bright daylight yet. I can be out in the open running around. So that's my first goal. Get in there in the dark on that first set. And before I even do that, I picked out a spot. Now I've either been there or I've looked at it on my HuntStand hunting app, and I'm looking for an area that gives me great vantage so I can see all the way around me. And the biggest thing you want to see, and this sounds like reverse, and it kind of is, but you want to see that downwind, either have it in a crosswind or even over your shoulder, either way. But you want to look a little bit downwind, because those coyotes are always going to circle downwind. Now, for years, I'd go straight into the wind and set up, and I hunt alone a lot, and I have coyotes come in behind me a lot. I'd go back and there'd be tracks there. My dog, I bring a dog a lot just because I like dogs. But my dog, he would actually go back there and he'd get on the track of a coyote that had come in behind us, and we didn't even know it, because again, the scent's going that way. He can't smell them. But if you have some type of angle where that coyote is going to try to go down, come in downwind, I need a whiteboard behind so I can do it. And then you're seeing where that coyote's circling. And what you need to do then is make sure you have a perfect shooting alley before he can get to the downwind spot, that you shoot him on either side. And, maybe if you've got an electronic collar, you set it out there, you can put some scent out there, you can put a decoy out there. All those things will help pause him as he's coming through there. Or right before he gets there, this is free. You just bark like a coyote, and you can stop them. Almost all, sometimes if they're going faster, you might have to bark a couple times if they're coming around you. But if they're just kind of sneaking in, looking around the country, one bark will stop them. You need to be on them when they stop. Slow as they're moving, you slowly move. They stop, don't move. As they're moving, slowly move. So, and then you always want to set up where there's coyotes. And this is something I think people miss a lot, is they just get out and go anywhere. But you got to just kind of think like a coyote. And it's real simple thinking. Everybody can do it. You don't have to be an Einstein here, but think food and think shelter. And in the morning, those coyotes typically are leaving a food or hunting source going to refuge or shelter. So at night, they're doing the opposite. And you just want to set up in between, be in that travel corridor in between. So they're coming toward that, because if you set up near, say, a highway or something where they're leaving, they don't want to be near a highway at daybreak, it's going to be hard to call them back that way. If they're on the move the opposite way, it's, it's just like elk. If an elk has come through one area, he doesn't necessarily want to turn around and go right back. You want to pull them to where they're going, where they want to be, where they feel safe to be. So you just kind of think that as you look over, get a high spot. The coyotes are going to be down in this creek bottom. This out west here and in the Great Plains, where I do a lot of hunting, I always look for those creek bottoms because they're down there looking for bunnies. And then they come up out of there at daybreak, trying to get up into the higher hills to bed up for the day, kind of escape. I like to be in the higher hills at daybreak, waiting for them and calling them to a place they feel confident going to.
Okay. So we're talking about some of the, I guess you could call them like just kind of the basic things to think about, just base things. When it comes to this, what do you feel like you've probably seen in terms of the biggest mistakes that a lot of hunters make when they're coyote hunting?
I think especially in this podcast, we're doing it in February.
Mm-hmm.
I think what a lot of people do this time of the year wrong is they use calls that they did a month or two ago. Coyotes in most areas are getting hunted now fairly well. There's a lot of contests out there, and those guys, not that it's a funny word, but they rape country. They're cruising through country, calling as fast as they can. And half the time, that's just a percentage I'm throwing off the top of my head, but they're educating coyotes because they're not waiting. They're trying to get the quick, easy coyote, throw in the back of the truck, move. Quick, easy. Well, a lot of those coyotes will come in and watch and see what's going on. Then they see those guys walk off. And one of the, like 2 or 3 sets ago, I was out and I had coyote below me. My dog was kind of working it a little bit. And it stayed out there at about 400 yards. And I should take a shot, but I figured the coyote was going to work the dog. It was a lone coyote. Breeding season's kind of going on now. And then out of the blue, 2 guys walk over the hill. I was on public land. These guys drove in on private. I hunt borders a lot. I love to hunt those border fences.
Yeah.
And these 2 guys were on private and open country, just walking along on the skyline. Oh my gosh, that coyote, you think, that they just had an M1 Abrams tank chasing it. It took off so fast.
Jeez.
So try something different. Try a different call. This time of year, vocalizations work. You don't have to get fancy, just a couple of lone howls and sit down there. And then the other thing is wait a long time. The coyotes right now are educated, and I sit, again, and I'm in open country, but I sit an hour, typically an hour, never less than 45 minutes. And I kill a lot of coyotes. I don't kill a lot of them personally, but when I kill coyotes, a lot of them are at the 30-minute mark.
Okay.
Or beyond. I very rarely kill a coyote at the 5, 10, 15-minute mark, unless I'm hunting early in the fall on coyotes of the year pups that will run right in. But again, most of those coyotes have taken a ride in a truck by now, either from callers or deer hunters. Deer hunters shoot a lot of coyotes, randomly. They're out in the woods, coyotes walking by, they shoot them. I do the same things.
Okay. When it comes to using an electronic collar or even your hand collar, for those that may not have that, how long are your calling sequences? Are you just letting that thing go the whole time? Or if you're on a hand collar, you're just trying to call as much as you can? Or are you doing like, say a certain amount of time that you're doing sequences?
Early, say you're hunting in October,
mm-hmm.
and you're hunting a lot of fresh young coyotes. I let that call go a long time, whether it's an electronic collar or a hand call. I try to call not nonstop, but and then give it a minute or two. And this time of the year, I do more curiosity. I'll do a couple howls, and I'll wait 10, 15 minutes even. Just look for a coyote show up from that howl. And if nothing comes in, then I might go to the prey sound, and I'll do it in a lot shorter bursts. I just won't, I won't hammer it home. It'll be like, I like fawns. I like dying fawns, large critters that are dying in the winter. And then I'll just, and then let it sit a while, and then do it a little more. And then I like to add biting sounds in, bickering. Coyotes biting each other, nipping each other, maybe a bark or two, something to show that there's something's dying, there's some excitement over it, there's other coyotes there, and that's a booster, typically a confidence booster. So I don't do a ton of all that, but again, just kind of setting the stage that there's something going on. Coyotes are fighting over it. And then coyotes, again, this time of the year, if they hear that fighting and obviously the food, but even the fighting and the vocalizations, if they don't have a partner, they'll come in and look and, possibly find someone to mate to. And then they'll also, pairs will come in to defend their territory, because as mating begins or ends, it could be, we're into, I don't even know what the date is. We're into February. They could be done mating. Then they're setting up territories and defending that territory. And that territory gets more and more protected the closer it gets to pup season. So, a lot of guys don't hunt in March, April, May even. Those are really good months, or can be good months for coyote hunting if you're just looking to manage coyotes, knock some coyotes off your property. Anymore, I'm a year-round coyote hunter. I go out in the middle of July, I go out in June, I go out now. When I'm deer hunting, I do a lot of hunting in the Midwest and Great Plains. I take all my coyote gear. If I get a deer down and tagged and I don't have to be on the road somewhere, I just start calling coyotes. That's what it's like, why not? Most states allow you to do it with the tag you already have in hand, or buying an additional tag for the cheese. So.
Okay. So a lot of these e-collars, they've got your prey in distress, whether it's rabbit, rodents, whatever it may be. Do you ever go into a calling session where you don't do any kind of coyote vocalizations that, let's say you're just running like a jackrabbit in distress call the whole time?
I do a lot of that, especially in the early part of the fall. Even in August, September, October, I think that's a really good plan, because what you have then is pups leaving the den. They've left mom and dad. They're in these sibling packs, 2 or 3 brothers and a sister, vice versa, whatever. And they get real competitive over hunting, and they're learning to hunt. So they're eager to run to some sound. They're just like, oh, wow, there's dinner. And then you'll have 2 or 3 come in and running into that. If you use a coyote howl at that time, you could scare those young pups. They're just not, tough enough yet and bold enough. But at the same time, just a little earlier than that, going back into summer, just a little, closer to June and July even, you can do some howling, and you can get mom and dad to come in and be really ticked off and get right in your face with that, because then they're still defending the area before their pups have dispersed. They're defending the den and defending the little pups, and they don't want another coyote around.
Okay. Now, are you a big decoy guy? You like using decoys a lot?
Yeah, I really started using decoys, but I kind of switched to dogs. I've got a dog now that is my coyote decoy. I'm trying to get someone to sew him a little suit, because he's black and white dog. I'm trying to get him a little coyote suit to put on him. Though this time of year, I tend not to use him quite as much. About sometime in January, these coyotes, again, at least in my neck of the woods, they get a little leery to everything. So I'd rather have them come in and hunt me. And a few weeks ago, I drew the line again. I had 2 coyotes come in, and one just popped up, and my dog's name is Sully. He's sitting right outside here looking in the window. And Sully I told him to lay by me, because I knew the coyotes would get nervous. So I had him laying right beside me, and a coyote popped up. All I could see was its ears, 100 yards away, upwind, which just totally blew me away. And he left. That coyote left. And I'm like, God, there's no way he saw me or the dog. Maybe he saw the dog, but again, he was laying in grass. And then all of a sudden, a second coyote popped up at about 100 yards, and Sully stood up then. He's defending his ground, but he didn't charge or anything. He just stood up. That coyote whirled and was gone. So
serious.
And I've had that happen last year. Kind of, it's about the same time, same timing, that they're just pretty leery, as they get pursued so much in the winter. In the summer, early January, I called in a pair. That coyote was going head to head with Sully. A lot of times they'll just come in and go right there. But then it's like I said, there's a transition where they've just seen enough and they don't want to deal with anything that looks a little spooky. But in the summer, it's the greatest show on earth. I mean, when he goes in and a coyote's coming in, they face off. And you'll hear coyote vocalizations like you've never heard before. They're just screaming at the dog.
Wow.
And you can move. You got so much flexibility. Like one setup this summer, and I remember the coyote come in off to this side, and I had the gun pointed to this side, and Sully's going in on the coyote, and they faced off probably about 30 yards, 20 yards. A lot of times that's about the distance. 20, 30 yards apart, they stand it and they confront each other. I was able to move my rifle and shooting stick, pick up my backpack, jam it under my elbow. And that coyote never even looked at me.
Jeez.
I don't know. I've always admired these animal damage control officers who've used decoy dogs over the years, and they usually use mountain curs. And I kind of got hooked on border collies. A couple of guys I know had used border collies, and then we were looking for a family dog, some type of dog that would just work right into the family. And border collies they're so so smart.
Yes.
And they pick up on everything. He knows when we're going coyote hunting. He knows when we're going shit antler hunting. He knows when we're going to go throw the tennis ball or chase the mule out in the pasture. He just he's got everything figured out, categorized. And so the minute we go out coyote hunting, he sits up, and before I even howl, he's just focused. But he loses his focus after about 20 or 30 minutes. We don't have a coyote come in, then he's like, come on, Mark, we should be doing something else.
What's going on here? Come on now. So but aside from that, like, are there any certain situations that you like to use? Let's say they've got those decoys that they're battery powered, that might have like a rabbit tail, or do you use like a life-size coyote or any others in your arsenal?
I've got a motorized one that just works on double A's, that just flips a little furry tail out there.
Yeah.
Anytime you can distract a coyote. It's just like with deer, elk, anything. They're coming in to look for something when you're calling. You're calling a turkey, it wants to see a turkey. Elk wants to see an elk. A coyote wants to see what it's either going to eat or mate. So I love those little ones that, not constant, but just every few seconds it'll flip. And a good cheap way to do that too, if you're on a budget and can't spend another 50, 80, $100, whatever. And a lot of times they'll come with collar, right, attached to it. But it's just to take a stick, just some fishing line, real light line, and tie a big turkey feather to it, or any type of puffy feather that will flicker in the wind. Those coyotes don't miss anything. That's why I said earlier, and this is something, if you're new to coyote hunting, I don't know here, when they're coming in, and you're going to have to adjust almost always, because they're fast. They rarely just walk in. They're usually kind of on a little bit of a lope, and they're looking. When they're moving, you can get away with a slow movement. When their head goes behind a bush, or they go into a little gully before they pop out, make your big moves then. But if they're stopped and looking, don't move, is they'll see it. And then again, if they're a young coyote, they may stay there. But if they've got any education, they're gone. And then you've got a running shot instead of a standing shot.
Okay. Do you like to do any kind of coyote hunting at night? Have you found any really good success doing that?
I haven't, but I'm starting to think more and more, because everybody else is doing it, And it's taking the coyote hunting education for the coyotes. They're figuring this out too. You know, it's there's a lot of pressure on coyotes these days. I'll tell you another thing people don't realize. And last week we got dumped on the snow, over a foot and a half snow more, depending on where you're at. And it was fluffy. And I knew right away that just knocks those coyotes' travel patterns out the door. They burn too many calories busting through that snow. But it also helps the aerial gunners. We've got a lot of that goes on here. In fact, they've got in our county, a guy goes out and flies. And I was sitting in my office last week cussing him, and it's their job, but it's like I could hear them flying in the helicopter. It's like, well, I guess I'd fly too. Deep snow, coyotes aren't gonna be able to go anywhere. It's a good day to get out and knock coyotes down, but it's also coyotes I want to go call.
True. So, that's true.
So you got to be careful. You be conscious of, and not only how many of your friends are out coyote hunting, how many other people are out coyote hunting. There may be an organization out there doing that on the behalf of the Livestock Association or the county or whoever. And so you might go into an area and it's like, God, there's no coyotes here. I'm calling. And I've had this happen a lot. Run into a rancher and goes, oh yeah, they just flew this area last week. They took out 42 out of this, 2-mile section. It's like, well, that makes sense,
Yeah, absolutely.
Coyotes.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with that in Texas. Like on our property, we just have a small 200-acre piece, which some people that are not in Texas, they might hear it like, oh man, it's a big piece, but Texas, it's pretty small. And there's a ranch behind us that they'll fly for pigs and coyotes. And when I hear that, I'm like, well, I'm not going to see anything for a while now. So it is what it is, but I get it. So we've talked, discussing the why. We've talked about what you need, and we've kind of gone down some rabbit holes with some different hows, if you will. So what kind of, and I'm gonna try and pull something out of you and pick something out of you, but do you have any kind of coyote hunting golden nuggets, if you will, that you don't share a whole bunch that they're only going to get right here on the podcast?
If I had to use just any call, I would still just go to a straight howl. If I'm testing country, because those coyotes will respond to you in most situations, dawn and dusk, not in the middle of the day. Certain areas, coyotes don't vocalize during the middle of the day. They just won't. I know that. You probably have seen that too. But a lot of these western areas, they do. They talk all day long. I can get them to talk. So vocalizations, dawn and dusk, that can help tell you if there's coyotes around. And if you're on a setup, it can bring a coyote in. That's a super easy one. And then I think people should try hunting more with a downwind, with the wind going, over their back into a downwind, because those coyotes are going to circle. Any smart coyote will circle. There's always exceptions to the rules. Just like I said, like that one I told you, I was laying down and those coyotes come upwind the other day. No way did I think they would. That was on a chunk of public ground that always gets hunting pressure. But in fact, I was just using coyote vocalizations there, period, nothing else. And maybe that's why they had confidence to come upwind. But I think that downwind angle, if you can get shooting lanes that are coming over your back, the wind's coming over your back, and you can see plenty of country out there, and there's plenty of country off to the sides where the coyotes can come from, because you're going to ruin that angle for 400, 500, 600 yards, depending on the wind, and topography, all that. Your scent's going to go down there and ruin that. But if you snuck in, you got big country on either side of you, river bottom, creek bottom, those coyotes will come up as they're coming around. I think that's something people should look into. An old time coyote hunter told me that back in like the late 80s, early 90s. And I've used it from time to time, because you get to a spot and the wind will be wrong, and it'll be just like, heck with it, I'm just going to do that. And more, I'm almost, where I live here in the foothills too of the mountains, the wind shifts 4 or 5 times in a half hour.
Jeez.
At dawn. It's just a constant. And so it's like, I want to go hunt and I can't. It's just the way the wind is, unless it's a real hard front blowing.
Mhm.
It seems like if it's like a 5-mile-an-hour wind, say it's out of the west, it'll be out of the north, the west, east, and south in the first 30 minutes as dawn's breaking, and that's when I like to hunt. I like to be out there.
Okay.
And I kill way more coyotes, but I hunt way more in the morning than afternoon. I don't think that's just Mark.
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm a morning guy.
Same here. So when let's talk pre-hunt. I know we kind of covered a little bit. You like to look for creek bottoms, but when you're sitting at your desktop or sitting down on the couch and you're just doing some e-scouting, got HuntStand pulled up, are there other topographical features, anything else you're looking at besides those creek bottoms when you're trying to locate coyotes?
Well, here's a HuntStand nugget that I look, and I live in the West. 50% of Wyoming is publicly owned. I hunt next door in Montana a lot because I literally live right on the border. I like to look for big landowners that don't allow hunting, and I hunt their borders all the time because of what? You can call a coyote across the fence. You can't always call a deer across the fence, but a coyote, he's going to come, and he's not going to think twice about coming across that border. Sometimes elk, it's hard to get him sometimes across a border like that, but a coyote, he's just thinking with his stomach, he's going to cross a lot of times, or with his genitalia if it's that time of the year. But borders, big ranches don't allow hunting, small ranches that don't allow hunting, landowners that don't allow hunting, and that's getting common coast to coast. That's just not my backyard thing. Everybody knows that. It's harder to get on land. But with coyote hunting, just look for a public land, or if you've knocked on a door and Bob lets you on here, and the next landowner doesn't, hunt those borders as much as possible. And then use your HuntStand app to look for the right open country, the right elevation, the right, again, maybe a river, a creek, some type of topography that could cause coyotes to be there more. But I hunt a ton of borders. That's kind of, if I got a section, like, it's common for there to be school sections all across America, state trust lands, they call them school sections, 640 acres. Just like you said, 200 acres, not much to hunt. 640 acres for a coyote. You can call the whole thing, most times, unless it's a real rugged or real heavily wooded country. You can call one corner or the other from sitting there. But I'll go to the farthest corner and get up against the landowner there. And if here's another nugget, especially this time of year, livestock. If there's livestock being fed there, and especially if they're pre-staging for calving season. And once calving season starts, every coyote in the country zooms in on where they're calving. So you'll have coyotes traveling miles just to get to those calving areas because it's free food. And it's not the baby calves, they're just eating after. And later on, they'll eat the calf droppings. They can get a lot of protein out of that, the real milky, rich droppings. So borders, livestock, and anybody that had the avian flu with chickens and is piling them up in their backyard.
That's not a bad one to think about. Didn't think about that.
And bait piles is a good thing too. It's hard to get wild game bait because of all the laws. Like roadkill's picking them up and stuff like that. If you can do it, but if you got a neighbor and he's got a dead cow or something, and he'll drag it over to a spot where you can set it up and call near it, or even better yet, my buddy's doing this right now in Kansas. Big shout out to you, Greg. He's got 2 or 3 cows piled up right now, and he just got it set up so he can come over a hill with a round bale and shoot the coyotes off the bait pile. So that's a way to keep coyotes in the area active with coyotes, and you can use it not only as a calling site, but just put a pop-up blind there, get in the dark and wait till daylight. Or if you're a night hunter, your thermal imaging. Whew, Katie bar the door. You can stack them up pretty good there. And a suppressor.
Yes.
Have a suppressor on your rifle if you're going to do that. It'll help you get those repeat shots.
Heck yeah. Well, Mark, I know we're running out of time here, so any final parting advice or any last nuggets you want to give the listeners out there?
Uh, the days of coyotes just running you over, it's not necessarily past, but
Mhm.
coyotes are getting a lot smarter. So you've got to hunt a little harder. It's just like in the 60s and 70s, you could blow on a tube and a bull elk could just, run right out of the woods at you. That
Yeah.
doesn't happen really anymore. And coyotes are kind of getting that way too. They're getting a little savvier and cagier. So, mix up your calls, sit a little longer, really, really study your setup area. So any coyote that does come in can't escape. You're gonna at least see them, if not get the shot. And then hopefully you'll get a coyote coming to your calls. It's not in some areas, it's an everyday deal. Some areas it's not. I mean, I
Mhm.
follow a lot of guys on Facebook. I know some guys they can go out and slam a car door and a coyote will come to it. That's not exactly what happens in my backyard.
Yeah.
But if I go out and kill a coyote a weekend, I'm having a pretty good time.
Can't complain about that. Well, Mark, man, I really appreciate you hopping on the HuntStand podcast with me again. Let the listeners know real quick where they can find you on social media. You got a website, anything else out there?
They can click on my social media, markkayser.com.